My role was to look at the sediment within the micro scale. So the fatberg had all the macro artifacts removed, so things like the wet wipes, the nappies, all that stuff got removed, and then the remaining fat got sieved through a 2 mil sieve. So I was trying to find out if there were any micropollutants present within that sediment. And I was using a light microscope and also an imaging flow cytometer to kind of assess what microparticulates there were within the sediments. We spent a long time counting things under a light microscope, and the first thing to note really was that it was very varied. There were lots and lots of stuff within the fatberg, and maybe too much actually to classify. So there was quite a lot of organic matter. There were things like sand and soil grains, little bits of plant material, some algae. Actually, looking at the two samples that I had from the fatberg, just by looking at them, they looked very different. So they looked very different in colour, and they contrasted in composition. So just in their fat content, one was negligible in fat, the brown one, but the light coloured one was like 50% fat. But one of the main components of the fatberg seemed to be fibres. There were quite a lot of fibres in there. Some of them looked quite like cellulose, so paper-like. So I think these were from toilet paper, and that's what's so great about toilet paper is we can put that down our toilets because it disintegrates quite easily in water. But we also picked up some other types of fibres that looked quite different. We picked up things like we picked up fibres that were maybe red in colour or blue in colour, which would suggest that they've been altered some way by humans, whether it's through dye. We also picked up some fine black, really kind of opaque black fibres as well. And then we also picked up some translucent fibres that looked very different from the toilet paper fibres. And these had quite a distinct morphology, so they were very uniform throughout their length. They almost looked quite cylindrical as well, and they looked very different to the kind of the plant-based stuff. So I was able to use infrared spectroscopy in order to characterise the composition of these different types of fibres that I was finding under the light microscope. And I was able to take them from my microscope slides and then place them carefully onto a different filter. And using infrared spectroscopy, the sample was interrogated by infrared light, and then the amount of light that my fibre absorbed at different wavelengths was characteristic of its composition. So it was almost like a fingerprint of what the fibre was made up of. And we found that a lot of these paper-like fibres that I was finding were indeed cellulose in their nature. So again, we're thinking this is coming from very likely to be from toilet paper. I also found some of the dyed fibres were also cellulose, so they could be cotton coming from washing machines perhaps. But also I picked up some microplastics in there as well. So I picked up some nylon fibres and also some polyester fibres as well. Being able to kind of have a snapshot into the composition of the fatberg was really interesting because it allows us to kind of look at stuff that might otherwise go unnoticed. We know that we've got these, the wet wipes and lots of cooking fat going down our drains, but also the fatberg was kind of acting as a reservoir for some of the microplastics as well.